She saved a billionaire's daughter from drowning, then vanished into the shadows. But when he finally found her, he uncovered a stolen identity, a buried scandal, and a woman the world tried to erase. What was she running from, and why did his heart refuse to let her go? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Ava Reyes kept her head down and her apron clean. At 25, she'd mastered the art of being invisible. She worked the closing shift at the diner on 12th and Main, cleaned the tables twice as well as expected, and never lingered for tips. Every spare dollar went into a battered envelope tucked inside her sock drawer, labeled only with a single word: escape. She didn't want to be noticed, not anymore. The walk home always took her along the riverside path, quiet, empty, tucked behind overgrown reeds and old concrete railings. That night, the fading sun painted the water in dull streaks of orange and violet, and the early spring breeze carried hints of rain. Ava walked briskly, head low, thoughts racing with calculations: rent, savings, maybe a new pair of shoes when these finally gave out. Then a scream shattered the stillness. A child's scream, sharp, panicked, cut short by a splash. Ava froze for only a second. Her eyes snapped toward the river, their small body flailing, arms slapping the water in pure terror. No time to think, no time to shout for help. She dropped her bag, kicked off her shoes, and vaulted over the rusted railing. The cold hit her like a punch, but adrenaline drove her forward. She kicked, dove, reached. The girl's jacket floated just below the surface, her tiny face bobbing up just enough to gasp and cry. Ava wrapped her arm around the child, pulling them both toward the shore. The current fought her, her legs burned, her teeth chattered, but she held on. They broke the surface near the rocks. Ava pulled the child up, coughed out water, and held her close. The girl sobbed into her shoulder, shivering uncontrollably. "You're okay," Ava whispered between gasps. "I've got you." She didn't let go until she was sure the child could sit up on her own. Her chest ached, her arms shook, but the girl was breathing. Moments later, tires screeched on the road above. A sleek black SUV skidded to a halt, doors flying open. Men in suits rushed out, but they were nothing compared to the man who came behind them. Dominic Vance. Powerful, commanding, the CEO of Vance Industries, his face plastered on financial magazines, his life tightly guarded from public scrutiny. Ava had seen him once on the diner's TV, some feature about philanthropy, or maybe a scandal she couldn't remember. He was sprinting toward them, panic etched across his otherwise composed face. "Emily?" he called out, voice cracking. "Emily." The little girl turned at the sound of her name, then flung herself into his arms. He clutched her, held her tight, murmuring things too soft to hear. Then he looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment, everything went still. The rushing river, the barking bodyguards, the flashing lights of a security vehicle now pulling up behind. Ava stood dripping wet, hair matted to her face, scratches on her arms, clothes clinging to her frame. She looked like nobody. But she had just pulled his daughter from a death that had almost taken her. He stepped forward. "Wait, you did..." "I just saw her fall," Ava said, her voice hoarse. "I was nearby. Anyone would have done it." "All of you." She raised a hand, backing away. "She's safe. Couldn't... That's enough. I don't even know your name." She gave him a faint, tired smile. "It's not important." And then she turned, picked up her bag from the ground, and walked barefoot into the dusk, leaving Dominic Vance standing by the river, clutching his daughter, wondering who this woman was who saved a life, and vanished like a ghost. Dominic stood rooted to the spot, eyes lingering on the path where Ava had disappeared. Water still dripped from his sleeves as he cradled Emily against his chest. His heart pounded, but not just from panic. That woman, drenched, trembling, silent, had looked at him with a calmness that didn't belong to someone who had just jumped into a freezing river. "Sir?" one of the bodyguards asked. "Should we follow her?" Dominic shook his head slowly. "No, not tonight." He glanced down at Emily, who was now curled up in his arms like a kitten. Her tiny fingers clutched the front of his jacket, and her eyes, usually so wide with mischief, were heavy with exhaustion. He hadn't seen her this shaken since her mother died. She stirred. "Don't let her go, Daddy." "Who, baby?" "Adi. She made the water stop. She made the scary part go away." Dominic held her tighter, throat thickening. "She's gone, sweetheart. But she saved me." "I know, and I won't forget that." The SUV doors opened, and the warmth inside wrapped around them as they climbed in. As they drove off, Emily pressed her face to the window, looking back at the empty riverbank as if expecting Ava to reappear. Dominic followed her gaze. Somewhere out there was a woman who had risked her life for a child she didn't know. No cameras, no hesitation, no name. And she had refused everything he offered. The next morning, Ava woke to find her soaked clothes drying over the radiator and her body sore in ways she hadn't felt in years. She winced as she lifted her arm to comb her tangled hair. A bruise was already blooming along her ribs, but that didn't matter. The girl was alive. That was what mattered. She stepped over a waterlogged pair of sneakers and slipped into her uniform. The diner didn't care if you'd saved a life the night before. Eggs still needed scrambling. Coffee still needed pouring. When she arrived, the regulars were already in their usual booths. Her boss gave her a nod. Nothing had changed. That was good. She didn't want attention. Not from strangers, not from wealthy CEOs, and especially not from the past. As she took orders, her mind replayed the river in slow motion. The flailing arms, the icy drag, the way the little girl had clung to her like she was the only solid thing in the world. She didn't even know her name. But she'd seen the father's face. Powerful, yes, but desperate too, and familiar in a way that made her stomach twist. Not from television or tabloids, it was something else, a feeling. She shook it off. Later that day, as she passed the newspaper stand near the bus stop, a headline caught her eye. "Easy Venley." Ava froze. The grainy photo showed the scene at the river, though her figure was barely recognizable, just a wet blur with tangled hair and a scraped arm. But it was enough. Enough to stir something. She turned and kept walking, faster now. That man had resources, security, power. If he wanted to find her, he could. And that terrified her. Because Ava Reyes, who once had another name, another life, had spent years making sure no one would ever find her again. Now, in one moment of humanity, she had stepped into the light. And someone like Dominic Vance never forgot the people who touched his world. The day after the rescue, Ava Reyes tried to forget the river. She scrubbed dishes at the diner with aching fingers, the cold water burning where scrapes from jagged rocks still throbbed. She hadn't told anyone what happened. That's how she liked it, quiet, unnoticed. But the city had other plans. Dominic Vance wasn't used to being ignored. His security team had combed nearby traffic cams and got a blurry image of a woman in soaked clothes walking alone. 48 hours later, a private investigator placed her at a 24-hour diner on 5th and Elmore. Dominic didn't send an assistant. He went himself. The diner's bell jingled softly as he walked in. Ava, wiping down a booth, looked up and her body stiffened. She recognized him instantly. That intense gaze, the expensive watch, the weight of wealth and power wrapped in grief. "You're Ava Reyes?" he asked. She nodded slowly, cautious. "I believe you saved my daughter's life," he said, his voice low, intense. "I owe you more than I can say." Ava looked around. A couple of truckers were eating breakfast. A waitress in her 40s watched from behind the counter. "I didn't do it for thanks," she said. "I'd still like to give you something, anything." He pulled out a sleek checkbook, pen already uncapped. "Name it." She took a step back. "Please don't." Dominic blinked. "Excuse me? I'm glad your daughter is safe." "That's enough." She turned to walk away, but Emily's voice stopped her. "Miss Ava," the little girl called from behind Dominic, her curls bouncing as she hurried in. Ava's heart stopped. Emily ran up and wrapped her small arms around her waist. "I told Daddy I wanted to see you again. Thank you for the river. I was really scared." Ava knelt, brushing damp hair from Emily's face. "You were brave, sweetheart. Will you come visit? Just for a little?" Emily's voice was soft, hopeful. Ava glanced up. Dominic was watching, not pressing. "I don't know," she said, voice cracking. "Maybe for a moment." 15 minutes later, Ava stood in the grand foyer of the Vance estate. She felt impossibly small. The chandeliers glinted like judgment. Every painting on the wall seemed to whisper, "You don't belong here." Emily tugged her hand. "Come see my room." Ava hesitated, then followed. The room was pink and overflowing with stuffed animals. A small violin case lay in the corner. "Do you play?" Ava asked. "Mommy used to," Emily said, voice dipping, "but she's gone now." Ava knelt again. "Do you want to learn?" Emily's eyes lit up. "Would you teach me?" I looked away. "I'm not really a teacher anymore." She caught Dominic watching from the doorway, arms crossed. He wasn't evaluating, he looked puzzled. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked. "I thank you." She stood and murmured, "I should go." Emily clung to her leg. "Don't go yet, just a little longer." Ava's hands trembled as she gently unwrapped the child's arms. "I'll come back, okay? I promise." Outside, Ava exhaled. Her heart was pounding. She walked past the fountain and out the front gates, refusing the ride Dominic offered. That night, she dreamed of the river, and a house with halls like a maze. Dominic, meanwhile, sat at his desk, scrolling through a tablet. Ava Reyes, age 25, no high school records before age 20, no birth certificate on file until 5 years ago, no bank accounts before that, no photos, no digital footprint before she started waitressing. He frowned. His instincts told him something didn't add up. But not in a dangerous way, in a hidden way. He was a man used to secrets, and this one had a name he wasn't sure was real. The next day, Auber stood behind the counter of the diner, pouring coffee and trying not to notice the man in the tailored suit sitting alone at the far booth. He hadn't ordered anything. He didn't need to. Dominic Vance didn't blend in anywhere. And eventually, she sighed and approached him. "You're making the other customers nervous." "Am I?" he asked, looking up. His tone was cool, but there was a flicker of something else beneath. Curiosity. Maybe even concern. Ava folded her arms. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to apologize. For ambushing you yesterday." "You didn't ambush me. You just came from a world I don't belong to." He tilted his head. "My daughter disagrees." Ava blinked. "She's a child. She's also the best judge of character I know." He paused, then added, "She misses you already." Ava hesitated. "It's not good for her to get attached to someone like me." "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. He leaned forward, voice softer. "You're afraid of something." Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. "I don't owe you my story." He agreed. "You don't." With that, he stood and left leaving a business card on the table. Ava stared at it for a long time before finally tossing it into the trash. But that night, as she lay in her tiny room above the laundromat, Emily's voice echoed in her ears. That small, earnest face asking, "Will you help me sing too?" The ache in Ava's chest returned, deeper than ever. She sat up, went to the drawer, and opened it. Inside was a folded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Young musician's future destroyed in elite theft scandal." The girl in the photo had longer hair, a thinner face, but the same eyes. Ava looked at her like she was staring at a ghost. Isabella Calderon. She folded it again and placed it beneath the mattress. At the Vance estate, Dominic stood outside Emily's room, watching her sleep. A drawing lay on her nightstand, stick figures holding hands. One tall one labeled Daddy, a small one labeled Me, and a third labeled River Lady. Dominic smiled faintly. Then he returned to his office and opened his laptop. The investigator had sent more files. He clicked through different records, tax filings, public databases. There was no Ava Reyes before 2020. Before that, the trail vanished. But there was a blurry arrest report, sealed, from 5 years ago. The name on it wasn't Ava. Isabella Calderon. Dominic's pulse quickened. He picked up his phone. "Get me everything you can on Isabella Calderon." Across town, Ava sat alone in the darkness. Her tea had gone cold, but she hadn't moved. Her body was still sore from the river, her soul more so. She had told herself she was safe now, invisible, but somehow, one moment by the river had dragged her back into the light, and that light burned. She closed her eyes. "I didn't disappear," she whispered. "I was erased." The next morning, Ava walked to the diner with her hoodie pulled up, heart heavy, but something stopped her at the door. A flower, a single white gardenia left on the doorstep. No note, just the flower. She picked it up, looked around, but no one was there. Inside, she placed it in a chipped glass near the window. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. The invitation came in a white envelope with gold embossing, formal, distant, and impossible to ignore. Ava hesitated for days. She read it, folded it, and tucked it under a sugar canister in her tiny kitchen. But when Emily appeared at the diner one evening, eyes wide and hopeful, Ava knew she couldn't say no. "For just one dinner," Emily pleaded, tugging at Ava's hand. "You promised you'd visit." That promise, uttered gently during their brief visit, had returned like a tide. Ava's instincts screamed to keep her distance, but Emily's voice disarmed all her defenses. So that Sunday evening, Ava stood at the gates of the Vance estate, dressed in the only nice thing she owned, a pale blue dress with a faded hem and stitched repair on the sleeve. She tucked her hair behind her ear, took a breath, and rang the bell. Inside, the staff was surprised. She wasn't what they'd expected, but within minutes, her gentle tone, easy smile, and quiet attentiveness settled the room like a warm blanket. Emily clung to her side, proud, giggling, as she introduced Ava to everyone from the butler to the head chef. Dominic arrived a few minutes late, his tie slightly loosened and his brows furrowed from a board call. But when he saw her, standing there in his home, calming his daughter with nothing but presence, his world slowed. The room fell into soft focus. She glanced up at him, unsure. He gave a quiet nod. Dinner was intimate, just a few relatives and close associates. Ava tried to keep to herself, speaking only when spoken to, but Emily's insistence pulled her into stories, laughter, and soft exchanges. She spoke about music, about the stars, about the way her mother used to hum when she cooked. Her words were light, but her eyes carried an ocean of unspoken things. Dominic sat beside her, silent for much of the evening, but watching. She wasn't trying to impress. That's what made it impossible to look away. Halfway through dessert, the tone shifted. A woman in a sequined gown leaned toward another guest and whispered, not as quietly as she thought. "Who's the girl in the maid's dress with Dominic Vance?" The table chuckled. Not all, but enough to sting. Ava heard it. She froze, her spoon lowered, her back straightened. She caught Dominic's eye for half a second, then quietly placed her napkin on the table and rose. "Thank you for dinner," she said gently. "But I should go." Emily reached for her, but Ava pressed a kiss to the girl's forehead. "You were lovely," she whispered. Dominic stood to follow, but she was already gone. The front door closed before he could reach the foyer. He turned sharply to the table, his voice low and cold. "Square the photographs. Who said it?" Silence. The woman in sequins looked down, suddenly very interested in her wineglass. Dominic said nothing more. He left the table and retreated to his study, seething. Not only at the insult, but at the pain in Ava's eyes when she left. The memory clung to him. Emily cried herself to sleep. She didn't even eat her cake, she whispered, hugging her pillow. Dominic sat beside her, guilt clawing at his chest. "She'll come back," he promised. "I'll make sure of it." But back in his office, with the fire dying in the hearth, Dominic's confusion deepened. Who exactly was Ava Reyes? He pulled up his laptop and entered the sparse information he had. Her name, the diner, a few images from security footage. Most people, even private citizens, left a trail. Social media, school records, public photos. Ava? Nothing before 5 years ago. No birth certificates, no driver's license prior to that, no high school records. Her digital existence began abruptly, too clean for coincidence. That night, after hours of digging, he found a photograph buried in an archived music conservatory yearbook. The girl wore a performance dress. Her hair was longer, her cheeks fuller. But the eyes, there was no mistaking them. Isabella Calderon. The name pulsed like a forgotten melody. She was a scholarship student, once praised in the music world for her voice, until her name vanished from every record around the same time a scandal rocked one of the Academy's biggest donors. Dominic leaned back, heart pounding. He remembered the headlines now, vague mentions of theft, scandal, and the Academy protecting a wealthy donor's reputation. The girl accused had disappeared. Now he wondered, had she run? Or had she been erased? Back in her apartment, Ava sat by her window, hugging her knees, watching the streetlight flicker. She knew the whispers would come again. They always did. Being around Dominic and Emily had felt real, dangerous, like breathing after holding her breath too long. But kindness had a cost, and she couldn't afford to pay it again. She slid the photo of her younger self back into a worn envelope. One day, someone would ask who Isabella Calderon was, and Ava Reyes would have to decide whether to run again or finally tell the truth. Dominic stared at the grainy photo on his screen. The woman in the image was younger, but the eyes, those same guarded eyes, were unmistakable. The article beneath it read, "Conservatory prodigy linked to scandal. Future in question." The name printed below the picture sent a shiver down his spine. Isabella Calderon. It wasn't Ava Reyes. He leaned back in his office chair, the weight of the revelation pressing hard against his chest. The more he read, the more furious he became. Isabella had once been a rising star in the prestigious Brookstone Music Conservatory. Her voice had reportedly brought professors to tears, but 5 years ago, everything changed. A donor's son accused her of stealing his Rolex. No charges were filed, but the expulsion was swift, merciless. The media painted her as a gold-digging scholarship student who got too close to the wrong man. Then, she disappeared. Until now. Dominic closed the laptop, his jaw clenched. He wasn't angry with her, he was angry for her. It was no wonder she changed her name, no wonder she ran. But he needed to hear it from her. That evening, Dominic found Ava sitting on a bench in the small park behind the conservatory Emily attended. She was quiet, legs pulled up, hair loose around her shoulders, as if she knew this conversation was coming. "If you saw the photo," Dominic said softly. Ava didn't flinch. Her hands remained folded in her lap. "I wasn't going to lie forever," she replied. "I just wanted to disappear a little longer." Dominic sat beside her, careful to give her space. "Isabella Calderon?" Ava exhaled sharply. "That name used to feel like music. Now it feels like a broom." He waited. She glanced at him, then away. "I didn't steal anything, I was set up. Julian, the donor's son, tried to take something I didn't want to give. When I pushed him away, he made up the story, said I stole his watch. His father threatened the school's funding unless they expelled me. They didn't even ask for my side." Dominic's chest ached as he listened. "I was 17, she whispered. "I lost everything. My place at the school, my scholarship, my reputation. Every door closed overnight. I went home to an empty apartment. My mom had already passed. I didn't have anyone, so I ran." He spoke gently. "You didn't deserve that." Ava gave a humorless laugh. "Deserving didn't matter. I became a headline, then a ghost." He leaned forward. "Why not tell me, from the beginning?" "I didn't think you'd believe me. You're one of them, rich, powerful, surrounded by lawyers and board members. I thought you'd look at me the way they all did." Dominic's voice was firm. "But I'm not them. I saw who you are the day you dove into a freezing river to save my daughter. That's who you are." Ava's shoulders trembled. "And Emily," he added, softening, "she looks at you like you hung the stars." Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. Not yet? Dominic stood. I don't want to pressure you, but I need you to know, whatever you decide, you don't have to hide anymore. As he walked away, Ava whispered to the wind, I don't know how to be seen anymore. Behind her, Dominic paused. He heard it. And he wouldn't forget. The next morning, Ava stood behind the diner's counter, her smile mechanical as she poured coffee and wiped down the same spot 3 times. Her apron was stained from the rush hour scramble, but she didn't notice. She was lost in thought. You don't have to hide anymore. But hiding had kept her safe. Hiding had been her armor. Could she really step into the light again? The bell above the door jingled. She looked up and there he was. Dominic walked in alone, dressed not in a suit, but in jeans and a simple shirt like he belonged anywhere but a boardroom. His presence drew every eye, but his attention was on her. Mind if I sit? He asked gently. His hesitated, then nodded toward the corner booth. She brought him coffee, then slid in across from him. She expected questions, maybe pity. Instead, he slid a manila folder across the table. What's this? The legal team, Dominic said. They've drafted a letter to the conservatory, demanding a public apology and a formal review. Julian is now a partner at his father's firm. But if you want justice, we can push. Ava stared at the folder like it might burn her. I didn't come here for revenge. Nomad said, you came here to survive. But maybe now, it's time to live. Ava blinked back, the emotion rising in her throat. Why are you doing this? He leaned forward, steady. Because my daughter adores you. Because I see the weight you carry, and because no one should be erased for speaking the truth. Ava touched the folder with trembling fingers, but didn't open it. It's been years. What if I've forgotten how to be that girl? Dominic smiled softly. Then be the woman who saved a child without asking for anything. She looked up at him, and this time didn't look away. Later that day, Ava found herself standing outside the music conservatory. It hadn't changed much. Ivy still curled around the brick walls. The same old fountain bubbled in the courtyard. She didn't go inside. Not yet. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. An old flyer, the last concert she had ever been scheduled to sing in. Her name had been printed at the top once. Now it was faded, barely visible. Just like her. She closed her eyes and let herself remember, not the scandal, not the fear, but the music, the feeling of losing herself in something bigger, brighter, louder than shame. That night, Dominic returned home late. Emily met him at the door, holding a drawing. It's me, you, and Ava, she said proudly. She's wearing a sparkly dress because she's a singer. He knelt beside her. You think she's a singer? Emily nodded. She sings when she doesn't think anyone's listening. Dominic kissed her forehead. You're very smart, you know that? Emily grinned, then whispered, Are you going to ask her to stay with us forever? Dominic paused. Hello, about what you saw. I must admit that I don't know yet, kiddo, he said, but I think I might ask her something soon. That night, Ava sat alone in her apartment, the folder from Dominic still unopened on her table. She lit a single candle, a habit she had picked up to calm her thoughts. Hide it, she placed the faded flyer. And then, with steady hands, she added a new item next to it. A photo Emily had drawn, Ava in a sparkly dress, standing on a stage. For the first time in years, she whispered her real name aloud. Isabella Calderon. And this time, it didn't feel like a bruise. It felt like a beginning. Ava stood in the back of the school auditorium, pressed against the wall like she didn't belong. The smell of fresh crayons, old wood, and cheap paper decorations surrounded her, but it was Emily's eager little face scanning the audience that held her in place. When their eyes met, the girl's trembling exploded. Ava gave a small wave, her fingers trembling. A teacher clapped to quiet the room, and the performance began, children stumbling through lines and giggling as they sang off-key. Ava smiled, but it was tight, nervous. She'd almost said no when Emily begged her to come. She wasn't sure if she had the right to be here, seated between parents who wore diamond watches and Chanel perfumes. After the last group sang, the teacher stepped forward. Before we end, we have a surprise. Emily Vance asked to perform a duet, but only if a very special guest agreed to join her. Ava, would you come to the stage? A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Emily's small voice carried from the stage. You helped me breathe. Will you help me sing too? Ava's feet moved before her mind could stop them. She walked slowly, eyes wide as a spotlight found her. There was no turning back. She reached the stage and knelt beside Emily. Are you sure? Emily nodded. You're my brave. The teacher handed Ava a microphone, her fingers wrapped around it like it was burning. The music began, a lullaby, simple, soft, familiar. Ava opened her mouth and began to sing. Her voice was quiet at first, fragile, like glass. But with every note, the trembling faded. The words settled into her chest, warmed her ribs, filled the spaces she thought would never feel safe again. The auditorium went silent. Not just quiet, utterly still. Even the children backstage stopped whispering. Ava's voice soared, carrying years of silence, pain, and unspoken dreams. Emily sang the last line with her, slightly off-pitch, but smiling like the sun. When the final note ended, the room remained breathless. Then came the applause, startled at first, then growing into something thunderous. Oval looked down. Emily clutched her hand like it was the only anchor she had. Backstage, Dominic stood watching. He had arrived late, tensions at the foundation had held him back. But the moment he walked in and heard Ava's voice, the world outside fell away. She wasn't just a waitress. Not just the girl who had pulled his daughter from a river. As she was like. Later that evening, the celebration continued in the Vance home. Emily ran barefoot in the garden, still buzzing with joy. Ava stood near the edge of the patio, arms crossed, unsure if she should stay longer. Dominic approached with 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to her. You're full of surprises, he said softly. Ava didn't meet his eyes. I used to sing before. He waited. I had a future once, scholarships, stages, but that version of me disappeared. He studied her, the way her voice dipped with memory, the sadness that settled behind her smile. You didn't disappear, he said. You were buried. But your voice, he paused, choosing his words carefully. It didn't forget you. She turned her head toward him. Why are you always so gentle with you? Because I know what it's like to lose someone and still wake up breathing. The night deepened, and stars blinked across the velvet sky. Ava sat on the stone bench near the rose garden, tracing the rim of her tea mug, still warm in her hands. The soft hum of cicadas filled the silence between her and Dominic, who had taken the seat beside her. I've never sung in front of anyone since before everything fell apart, she murmured. Dominic glanced at her gently. Then tonight meant even more. She nodded, her gaze distant. I thought that part of me died. That if I sang again, I'd remember everything I was forced to give up. But Emily, she didn't let me forget. He smiled faintly. She's good at that, reminding people who they are. I was so scared. Ava's voice slightly. Even now, I'm scared. Of being seen, of being heard, of being wanted. Dominic's eyes never left her. Ava, I'm not who you think I am, she said quickly, cutting him off. I'm not brave or put together or special. I'm someone who ran. I'd been hiding in diner aprons and worn shoes, afraid the past would catch me. Dominic was quiet for a moment, then leaned in slightly. But tonight, you weren't hiding. Ava's eyes welled with tears. It's easier when Emily's around. She looks at me like I'm safe, like I matter. You do matter, he said simply. She looked at him then, really looked, and what she saw wasn't just the powerful CEO everyone else feared. It was a man who had been broken too, a man who understood silence, who had sat in grief and still found a way to keep breathing. Dominic spoke again, his voice lower. My wife, she died 5 years ago, car accident. Emily was 3. She barely remembers her. I haven't let myself get close to anyone since. Ava's heart plunged. I was afraid if I let someone in, I'd lose them too. he continued. Afraid that love was just something you borrowed until life took it back. She reached for his hand before she could think twice. Their fingers touched, hesitated, then locked. I know what it's like, she whispered, to live as a ghost, to be afraid of wanting anything, because wanting hurts. They sat in silence, two people not quite whole, but no longer pretending to be. Suddenly, a small voice called from the porch, "Daddy! Ava, look what I made." Emily ran over, barefoot, her pajama sleeves trailing behind her. She held a piece of construction paper in her tiny hands. Crayons had been used with full force. In the drawing, a smiling stick figure family, Dominic, Emily, and Ava in the middle, holding hands. Hearts filled the sky above them. Ava looked at it, stunned. "Is that me?" Emily nodded proudly. "You're part of us now." Dominic's voice was quiet but firm. "She already is." Ava pressed the drawing to her chest, unable to speak. Emily hugged her tight. "Will you sing me to sleep again?" Ava nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. That night, as Ava tucked Emily in, she sang a soft lullaby by the window. Dominic stood in the hallway, listening, his hand resting on the doorframe. He wasn't afraid anymore. And neither was she. The morning after the school performance felt unusually quiet. Ava stepped outside her apartment building to see two suited men waiting near a car. She paused, heart hitching, but they didn't move toward her. Instead, one of them handed a folded tabloid newspaper to a passing vendor. Her name was on the cover. "Waitress who sang at Vance Gala has criminal past," the headline screamed. Odds of breath caught. She grabbed the paper from the stand, flipping to the second page. There it was, her face. The article laid out twisted details of her past, painting her as a liar, a fraud, who had charmed a billionaire and his daughter with a sob story. She dropped the paper as if it burned her fingers. By the time she arrived at the diner, the stares had already begun. Her boss gave her a pitying look and whispered, "Might be best if you take a few days off." Ava didn't argue. She nodded and walked straight back out, the ache in her chest growing tighter. Across town, Dominic stood in his office with the same paper crumpled in his hand. His board had already summoned him for an emergency meeting. He entered the boardroom to find a long table of cold, disapproving faces. "Dominic," one of the directors began, "you need to distance yourself from this woman immediately." "She lied to you," another chimed in. "This could damage your credibility, your leadership, your foundation's public image." Dominic listened quietly, arms crossed, jaw clenched. One man, older and more severe than the rest, leaned forward. "You're putting your reputation at risk, and worse, your daughter's." Dominic stood still for a moment, letting the silence settle over the room. Then he said, voice low and clear, "Ava saved Emily's life, when she didn't know who we were, when there was no gain, no camera watching." He took a breath. "She didn't lie. She survived. You don't know the whole story, but I do. And I'm not going to pretend she's disposable just because it's convenient." But the board fell quiet. Dominic turned to leave, then paused at the door. "If protecting someone good costs me your approval, then I'll pay that price gladly." At home, Emily sat on the stairs, clinging to her favorite drawing, a picture of herself, Ava, and Dominic, holding hands. She'd seen the news too. She looked up as her father entered. "Daddy, are they taking her away again?" Her voice trembled. Dominic knelt, pulled her close. "No one's taking her away, sweetheart. Not if I can help it." He stood and called his assistant. "Schedule a press conference." Today, the press conference was held in the grand atrium of the Vance Foundation's headquarters. Reporters filled every row, microphones pointed, cameras flashing. Dominic stood behind a sleek podium, hands firm but calm. "I know many of you have questions," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "About Ava Reyes, about the stories circulating, about who she is." He paused, glancing to the front row where Emily sat beside his assistant, clutching her drawing tightly. "I will not entertain speculation or feed the machine that thrives on tearing people down. What I will say is this: Ava is a hero. She saved my daughter's life. She brought light into a home that had gone quiet, and she did it with no motive, no agenda, no desire for recognition. Flashbulbs exploded. A murmur ran through the room. She was painted as a fraud, but the truth is, she was framed years ago and forced into hiding. We're correcting that, not because she asked us to, but because it's right. He stepped aside, then walked toward Ava, who had quietly arrived moments earlier. Their eyes met, and he reached out, not as a CEO protecting his image, but as a man choosing to stand by someone worth fighting for. After the press conference, the two of them sat quietly in his office. Ava's fingers trembled slightly as she held a mug of tea, staring at it like it might vanish. "I've never been fought for before," she whispered. "Not like that." Dominic leaned forward. "Well, get used to it." She looked at him, a shaky smile tugging at her lips. "I don't know how." "Then we'll figure it out together." Later that afternoon, Emily bounced into the room with her backpack, handing Ava a crumpled paper. "It's a story I wrote at school," she beamed. "It's called The Mermaid Who Saved the Princess." "That's you, Ava." Ava blinked fast to hold back tears. "That's beautiful, Em." Emily tugged her hand. "Daddy said you're staying. Does that mean you're part of us now?" Dominic stepped beside her, answering softly, "If she wants to be, yes." That night, Dominic offered Ava something more than words. He invited her to join the foundation, not as a guest or a figurehead, but in an official, permanent role. "You have a voice," he said, "and your experience could help others who've been silenced. We're starting a new program, legal and emotional aid for those falsely accused, and I want you to lead it." Ava stared at him, breathless. "Why me?" "Because no one will fight harder for the truth than someone who's lived through the lie." Her eyes filled again. "I'm not used to being seen like this." Dominic smiled. "That's going to change." She accepted, but under one condition. "On weekends, I still read bedtime stories with Emily." "That's non-negotiable." Dominic laughed. "Deal." As night fell, the house felt different, warmer. Not just filled with voices, but with healing. In the quiet of her room, Ava sat beside the bed, Emily already asleep with her arms wrapped around the mermaid story. Dominic peeked in, leaning against the doorframe. "You look like you belong here," he said gently. Ava looked back at him, her voice a whisper. "For the first time, I believe that." The stars above the Vance estate shimmered like soft candles as the charity gala reached its peak. Crystal glasses clinked, violins whispered elegance, and golden light spilled from the chandeliers overhead. Dominic stood in his black tuxedo, still and silent, his gaze fixed on Ava. She wore a midnight blue gown, simple, modest, yet it transformed her into something ethereal. Emily had chosen it for her, tugging at Ava's hand in the boutique and saying, "You look like the sky when it's happy." That memory now danced through Ava's mind as she tried to steady her breath. Dominic extended a hand. "May I?" She hesitated but placed her fingers in his. The music shifted into a slower tempo. They moved together, awkward at first, then fluid, then something softer, something intimate. Ava's heart raced with every turn, every gentle press of his hand against the small of her back. "I've never danced like this before," she whispered, unable to look him fully in the eyes. "Someone you trust?" he asked quietly. "Someone who sees me," she replied. They didn't speak again, not for several minutes. The crowd melted away. For once, Ava wasn't shrinking from the spotlight. She was standing in it, and someone was holding her there. When the music ended, Dominic didn't let go immediately. His thumb brushed hers, and for a moment, Ava's guard lowered completely. They stepped out into the garden for air, away from curious eyes. Stars scattered across the night sky, and cicadas hummed gently in the bushes. "I don't understand you," Dominic finally said. "You save my daughter, you become the center of her world. You do good over and over, and yet you look like you're waiting for someone to pull it all away." Ava's throat tightened. "Because that's what always happens." He turned to face her fully, the moonlight casting shadows across his face. "Isabella," he said, using her real name deliberately now. I've spent most of my life building walls, but with you, they fall faster than I ever imagined. I don't want to waste what's real because of fear." She looked down, then slowly up. "I'm afraid of being happy, afraid of believing this could last." "Then let me be the one who makes you unafraid," he said. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle, tentative, like two people learning how to breathe again. It wasn't perfect, but it was true, and it left Ava trembling in his arms because hope was the most terrifying thing of all. Later that night, Ava sat on the edge of her bed, still in her gown, still dazed by the feel of his kiss. On her nightstand was a drawing from Emily's stick figures of the three of them holding hands, under a giant smiling sun. She'd labeled it, "My Real Family." Ava pressed it to her chest, but her peace shattered the next morning. A heavy envelope arrived at the estate, delivered directly to her by Dominic's assistant. Inside, a typed letter, unsigned, a familiar name at the bottom, the man who had falsely accused her years ago, the one who had made her a pariah. Off his hush money, tens of thousands of dollars if she would disappear again. Ava's fingers trembled as she held the letter. The offer was cold, calculated, a simple transaction to buy her silence once more. She read the final line again, disappear, quietly, and this time, stay gone. Her jaw tightened. For years, she'd lived in the shadows of that lie. She'd paid in tears, in fear, in the stolen time of a future she was never allowed to dream. But not anymore. Dominic found her standing by the fireplace, the letter still in her hand. "I know that look," he said, stepping closer. She handed him the envelope, her voice low but steady. "He thinks he can erase me again." Dominic's eyes scanned the page. Then his expression shifted, no longer calm, no longer composed. There was fury there, but deeper still, pride. "You won't let him," he said. "I won't," she replied. "I'm done hiding." "Then we fight him together." She nodded, her hand sliding into his. That evening, Ava sat in front of a live-stream camera in Dominic's home office. A simple background, no makeup, no script, just her voice. "My name is Isabella Calderon. Years ago, I was accused of a crime I didn't commit. I lost everything, my education, my future, my name. But I didn't lose my truth." The stream went viral within hours. People remembered her. Music students who'd admired her, teachers who had whispered doubts but stayed silent. One by one, voices joined her own. The story began to unravel. Dominic made his own statement to the press. Standing beside her, he said, "We don't discard people for the mistakes others forced on them. We lift them back into the light." Emily, watching from the couch, asked, "So they're not going to take her away?" "No," Dominic said, crouching beside her, "because the truth is stronger now, and because we're stronger together." Ava wiped her eyes quietly. "Thank you." But Dominic turned to her and shook his head. "Don't thank me. What you've done, it's more courageous than anything I've ever faced in a boardroom or courtroom. You didn't just tell the truth, you owned it." Days later, Ava received a new letter, but this one came from the foundation Dominic had started in honor of his late wife. It offered her an official position, Director of Advocacy for the Wrongfully Accused. When Dominic handed it to her, she stared at it for a long time. "Is this pity?" "No," he said. "It's purpose, and it's yours if you want it." Ava's voice cracked. "I've never been fought for before." "Then let this be your first of many." She accepted. At night, after Emily had gone to bed, Ava and Dominic sat in the garden beneath a sky bursting with stars. Her hand rested in his. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "Do you ever think maybe some people get broken just so they can learn how to rebuild someone else?" Dominic looked at her with quiet awe. "You didn't just rebuild me, Isabella. You made me want to be seen again." And in the hush between them, something sacred settled, a trust forged through trembling, through truth, and through love that had never been asked for but had finally been chosen. The courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers, the kind that came just before a storm broke. Ava sat stiffly in the front row beside Dominic, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Emily sat between them, fidgeting with a ribbon in her hair, too young to understand the full weight of the day, but old enough to sense its importance. Ava's lawyer gave her a reassuring nod as the judge entered and everyone rose. She had waited years for this moment. Years of hiding, of shame, of being someone she wasn't, because the world had forced her into silence. Now, the truth was about to be spoken aloud. Before strangers, cameras, and history, the judge cleared his throat and began. Regarding the matter of Isabella Calderon, formally misidentified and accused in the matter of academic misconduct and theft, the court has reviewed all submitted evidence, including new testimony from the institution and corroborating documents from independent investigators. Ava's breath caught. Based on the overwhelming evidence of fabrication, suppression of critical information, and character defamation by third parties, the judge continued, this court declares Ms. Calderon fully cleared of all prior accusations. Her name and record shall be restored in full. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Then Emily clapped her tiny hands and shouted, "She did it!" Laughter rippled through the room. Ava pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Dominic reached for her other hand and squeezed. Tears streamed silently down her face, but they weren't tears of grief or rage this time. They were of release, of reclaiming herself. After the proceedings, Ava stepped out into the sunlight, blinking against the flash of cameras. Dominic guided her down the steps of the courthouse, his hand firm at her back. Then he stopped, turned toward her, and dropped to one knee. She gasped. From his pocket, he pulled out a modest, elegant ring. "I'm not doing this to repay a favor," he said, voice strong but eyes glistening. "Not to thank you, not to save you. I'm asking you to marry me because I choose you, Ava. Because I want to build a life with the woman who saved my daughter, and in so many ways saved me too." A stunned silence fell over the crowd, even the reporters momentarily forgetting their questions. Emily tugged Ava's sleeve and whispered loudly, "Say yes." Ava looked down at Dominic, at the man who had once been a stranger, but now felt like home. She remembered the river, the fear, the fragile child clinging to her, and she remembered how Dominic had fought for her when she hadn't even believed she deserved it. Her lips trembled. Applause erupted from the people around them, and cameras flashed wildly, but Ava didn't care. The only thing she saw was Dominic rising and pulling her into his arms, his forehead against hers as they both laughed and cried. The wedding was held by the same riverbank where everything had begun. A soft breeze rustled the leaves above, and golden sunlight filtered through the trees, dancing across the surface of the water. White chairs lined the grass, filled with people who had witnessed Ava's transformation, from a quiet waitress with a hidden past to a woman who stood tall, unashamed and loved. Emily, dressed in a pale pink gown, beamed as she scattered flower petals down the grassy aisle. She paused to wave proudly at Dominic before continuing, her curls bouncing with each step. Then came Ava, her simple ivory dress flowing behind her, no veil, no grand procession, just her, barefoot and smiling, eyes locked on the man waiting beneath the floral art. Dominic looked at her like she was the sunrise, and to Ava, that's exactly what this day felt like, light breaking through after too many years in the dark. As the officiant spoke gentle words about love, healing, and second chances, Ava reached for Dominic's hand. When it was her turn to speak, she took a breath, steady and sure. Some people think stories begin with a moment of triumph or a grand declaration, but ours began in silence, on a riverbank, soaked to the bone, with no words at all. I thought I was lost that day, but it turns out I was finally being found. Her voice softened. Emily saved me that day too. Not just because she clung to me, but because she gave me someone to protect again. And Dominic, you gave me something I never thought I'd deserve. A future, a family, a home. There were few dry eyes left by the time they exchanged vows. When they kissed, the wind picked up slightly, as if nature itself celebrated with them. At the reception, the laughter was loud, the music joyful. Emily proudly introduced Ava as "my new mom" to everyone she met, and Ava's heart melted every time she heard it. She never thought the title would feel so right. Later, away from the crowd, Ava sat with Emily beneath the same tree where she had once watched the river in silence. Emily leaned into her side, her tiny hand wrapping around Ava's. "Mommy," Emily whispered, her eyes wide and sleepy, "can we stay like this forever?" Ava brushed a strand of hair from the child's cheek, smiling through the tears welling in her eyes. "Forever," she whispered. "And longer?" In the distance, Dominic watched them, his heart full in a way it had never been before. He walked toward them, and Ava looked up, reaching for his hand. The three of them stood together in the fading light, one family, stitched together not by perfection, but by choice, by survival, by love. And as Emily ran into the open field beyond, her laughter ringing like music, Ava and Dominic followed hand in hand, walking not just into the dusk, but into everything that came after. Their story, born from a rescue, tested by truth, and crowned with love, had finally found its home.